They'll say it doesn't make sense, that it's not the right time, that something about it just feels off. And they'll use those words, logic, reason, rationale, as shields against a truth they're terrified to feel. Because the avoidant doesn't just run from love, they outthink it. They convince themselves out of every moment. That asks them to soften. They'll analyze connection, like it's a problem to be solved, instead of a feeling to be surrendered to. And when the warmth between you starts to grow, they'll find a reason why it's too fast, too much, or too soon. They'll tell themselves they're being realistic, that they're just protecting themselves from disappointment, from heartbreak, from making a mistake. But what they're really protecting is the safety of their emotional distance. Because for them, logic isn't just logic, it's armor. You'll notice how they talk themselves out of things that are good. They'll take something simple, a compliment, a kind gesture, a quiet moment that feels too intimate, and start pulling it apart in their mind. Why would they say that? What do they want from me? What if I can't keep this up? It's their way of slowing down a heart that's starting to move too fast. See, logic gives them control. It lets them stay in their head, where things are tidy and explainable, instead of their body, where things are unpredictable and raw. When they feel something that threatens that order, love, closeness, vulnerability, they use reasoning like a brake pedal. They tell themselves they're being wise, but really, they're just being scared in a sophisticated way. They'll say they're thinking things through, but you'll feel the distance creeping in. You'll feel the warmth start to fade as their tone becomes measured. Their eyes become calculating, their energy cautious. You'll see them weigh every word, every gesture, every risk, and what was once connection starts to feel like negotiation. You'll wonder where the softness went, where the laughter went, where you went, because somehow it all feels like you've been put on trial. You start questioning yourself. You start replaying moments, wondering if you said something wrong, or moved too fast, or cared too deeply. But this isn't about you. This is their nervous system, trying to stay in control. For them, being loved feels dangerous, because love isn't logical. It doesn't follow a pattern. It asks for surrender, and surrender was never safe for them. When they were small, love might have come with confusion. They might have had to stay alert, to feel secure, always thinking, always analyzing, always making sense of what felt inconsistent. That early wiring taught them that feelings can't be trusted, that safety comes from understanding, not from feeling. So even as adults, they build emotional walls out of rational explanations, walls that sound mature, that sound like clarity, that sound like wisdom, but are really fear, disguised as self-awareness. When you try to get closer, they'll turn it into a concept. They'll discuss the idea of closeness. Instead of actually being close, they'll talk about what love should look like, how it should feel, why timing matters. And you'll realize they're hiding behind words to avoid being felt. Because if you feel them, they might start to feel themselves. And that's the one thing they can't risk. They've spent years believing that their feelings will betray them, that their emotions make them weak. So when love comes in, real love, they start building logic towers in their mind. Every conversation becomes analysis. Every moment becomes proof for why it's safer to retreat. And slowly, without even realizing it, they turn connection into calculation. But here's the irony. The logic that's supposed to protect them becomes the very thing that isolates them. They'll stand there, emotionally safe but lonely, detached but aching, free but numb. And when they see you, when they feel the weight of your care, your patience, your warmth, it stirs something in them they don't know how to handle. You're not just another person. You're a mirror. You reflect what they've buried: the longing, the tenderness, the ache for closeness. They've spent years trying to rationalize away. But love doesn't disappear just because they label it. It waits, quietly, patiently, until the logic starts to fail and the loneliness begins to hum louder. That's when the real struggle begins. The war between their need for safety and their need to be known. They'll try to explain why it can't work. They'll tell themselves they're being logical, but underneath, they're terrified that this time they actually care. Because this time, the logic isn't working fast enough to silence their heart. When logic starts cracking, at first, their reasoning makes sense. You even admire it. They seem calm, collected, grounded. They talk about boundaries and pacing, about doing things right, and it sounds wise. You tell yourself, they're just being careful. They've been hurt before. They just need time. But then something shifts. The time keeps stretching. The caution keeps growing. And every step forward feels like you're walking through fog. You can see them, but never touch them. You start realizing that logic has become their language of escape. When you reach out, they respond with thought, not feeling. When you open your heart, they open their mind. And somehow, the conversation drifts away from what's real. You'll talk about connection, but never actually feel it. You'll discuss emotions, but not experience them together. They live in explanations, in understanding things, rather than living them. It's like loving someone who's always in another room. You can hear them, but the walls are made of logic. And when your emotion starts to rise, they retreat behind words like, I just need space. I don't want to make a mistake. I need to process this. You hear care in those words, but their nervous system is just pulling the emergency brake. Because closeness isn't logical. It's messy. It's unpredictable. It requires surrender. And surrender threatens their survival wiring. They'd rather dissect a feeling than sit inside it. They'd rather talk about connection than be held by it. Because if they stay too long in warmth, the walls start melting, and that terrifies them. You can see it in their eyes. When things get quiet, when the laughter fades, and the silence becomes intimate, their body stiffens, their mind starts spinning. You can almost feel the shift from presence to protection. They'll say something distant, something practical, something that pulls the air out of the room. And you'll feel that sting, that familiar ache of being near someone who's not really there. You might start explaining yourself, trying to make them see that love doesn't have to hurt, that safety can feel like this. But their logic has a way of turning your tenderness into a debate. They'll analyze your feelings, challenge your needs, ask questions that sound curious, but are actually defenses. It's not malice, it's self-protection. They've learned to think faster than they feel. Because when they were young, feeling wasn't safe. Maybe no one showed up for their pain. Maybe vulnerability was punished, mocked, or ignored. So they adapted. They replaced emotion with explanation. They replaced trust with strategy. Now, as adults, their logic gives them the illusion of control. But control and peace are not the same thing. Because you can't logic your way into intimacy, you can only feel your way there. And no matter how sharp their mind is, no amount of reasoning can soothe the ache of disconnection. They'll start to notice it late at night, after the texts have slowed down, when the silence feels heavy, when they realize that the safety they built feels like loneliness now. They'll stare at their phone, hover over your name, want to reach out, but they'll talk themselves out of it. They'll replay the last conversation, rationalizing every distance, convincing themselves it was for the best, that they were being logical. that they're doing the right thing. But the truth will echo quietly beneath it. They miss you. They miss what it felt like to be seen without needing to explain themselves. They'll bury that truth in distraction, in work, in logic, in noise. But emotions have patience. They wait. They resurface when the noise fades. And little by little, the cracks start forming. The logic that once protected them starts to feel hollow. The control they once relied on starts to feel heavy. Because no matter how rational they try to be, their body knows what it's missing. It knows the warmth of your presence. It knows the safety of being understood. It knows the longing that thinking can't solve. That's when confusion begins to creep in. They'll start questioning themselves. Why do they feel anxious when they should feel free? Why does being safe feel so empty? Why can't they stop replaying moments where they let love slip away? This is the beginning of the unraveling. The moment logic meets loneliness, the moment the mind can't silence the heart anymore. And though they won't admit it, they'll start to realize that maybe, just maybe, their reasoning wasn't wisdom. It was fear. But fear disguised as logic is harder to confront. It feels justified. It feels smart. It feels true. That's the trap. They can't tell the difference between wisdom and avoidance. They call it boundaries. But sometimes it's just distance in disguise. They call it independence. But often it's isolation dressed up as self-respect. They call it maturity. But sometimes it's fear with better vocabulary. And when you see through it, when you see the ache beneath the calm, they feel naked. Because your presence makes their reasoning crumble. Your warmth makes their walls tremble. And your love, without force or logic, shows them what safety could feel like. If only they'd stop running from it. The cost of being right. There comes a moment when being right starts to feel wrong, when all the logic in the world can't drown out the sound of your own loneliness. For the avoidant, that moment arrives quietly, not through confrontation, not through chaos, but through silence. The silence they once found comforting starts to echo differently. It doesn't feel like peace anymore. It feels like absence. They'll wake up one morning and realize they don't have anyone to text. No warmth waiting for them. Just the hollow stillness they once called freedom. It's in that emptiness that the truth begins to whisper. All the overthinking, all the analyzing, all the explaining, none of it stopped the ache. It just delayed it. Because you can't logic your way out of being human. You can't analyze your way out of wanting connection. They'll sit with their thoughts. And for once, the thoughts don't protect them. They just loop. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe they wanted too much. Maybe this is what's best. But then another voice speaks, the one they've been running from. Then why do I miss them? Why do I replay the moments that felt safe? Why does love feel dangerous, but loneliness feel worse? That's when the battle begins. The logical mind tries to stay in control, listing reasons, pointing to mistakes, cataloging memories as evidence for distance. But the heart doesn't care about evidence. It only remembers the feeling, the warmth, the safety, the sound of someone saying, "I'm not going anywhere," and meaning it. They'll try to forget it. They'll distract themselves. They'll keep busy, work late, scroll endlessly, text old friends, just to fill the space. But the ache seeps through the cracks. It shows up in songs that remind them of you, in quiet nights, when the world slows down, in the softness they suddenly crave and can't find. They'll realize that the control they fought for was never freedom. It was fear wearing a mask. Because control promises safety, but delivers isolation. It keeps them from being hurt, but also from being healed. And love, the kind they secretly want, can't survive in a cage built by logic. They'll begin to see that their independence has a price, that every boundary they built to keep from being swallowed has also kept them from being seen. They've protected themselves so well that no one can reach them, not even you. And when that realization lands, it cuts deeper than any heartbreak because they can't blame anyone this time. Not you, not their past, not the people who once hurt them. The distance is theirs now. They chose it, and they're alone inside it. That's when the regret begins. It starts small. A thought here, a memory there. They'll wonder what you're doing. If you're happy, if someone else gets to see the parts of you they pushed away, they'll think about reaching out. But the fear will tighten again. They'll rationalize their silence as respecting space. But deep down, they know it's cowardice, because reaching out would mean admitting they were wrong, that their walls didn't protect them, that their logic was just loneliness in disguise. They might start testing the waters, liking a post, sending a casual message, checking in under the pretense of friendship. They'll tell themselves they're being responsible, that they're not ready for more. But the truth is, they're starving for connection, for softness, for the feeling of being known without being analyzed. And that hunger scares them more than anything because it threatens their illusion of control. To admit they miss you means admitting they still need someone, and need, for the avoidant, has always felt like weakness. So they'll fight it. They'll try to outthink it. They'll dive deeper into logic, explaining to themselves why this longing isn't real. But longing doesn't fade. When it's denied, it grows. It hides beneath their routine, their plans, their confident smile. It hides in the space between sentences, in the pause after "I'm fine." And when they're alone, it comes out, not as tears, but as restlessness, as insomnia, as the ache of missing something they convinced themselves they didn't need. They'll look at the people around them, the ones who seem at peace, and wonder how they do it, how they stay, how they trust, how they let themselves be loved without running from it. Because somewhere inside, they know they've been running from the very thing they were searching for. They've mistaken safety for solitude. They've confused logic with peace. They've built a fortress and called it home, but it's just a beautifully designed prison. And as the walls close in, they start realizing something. Love doesn't disappear just because you deny it. It waits. It waits for the day they stop explaining it away. It waits for the moment they finally admit that thinking about you hasn't stopped, that no matter how much they analyze, they still feel. And the irony? They've spent years trying to prove they don't, trying to master the art of emotional detachment. But the body keeps score, the heart remembers, and the truth always surfaces, especially when silence grows loud. That's the cost of being right. You win the argument. You lose the connection. You protect yourself from pain, but also from healing. And for the avoidant, that realization doesn't come as a sudden crash. It comes as a slow collapse, one thought at a time, one regret at a time, one lonely night after another, until finally, logic stops being enough. Because you can't reason your way out of love. You can only feel your way back into it. When logic starts cracking, they've always trusted their mind more than their heart. Their mind made sense. It gave them rules, explanations, control. It was their shelter in a world that once felt too unpredictable, too emotional, too unsafe. But logic has limits. And one night, quietly, unexpectedly, they hit them. It's not a big event, no explosion, No dramatic moment, just a stillness. That doesn't feel safe anymore. They're sitting there, doing what they always do, working late, answering messages, listening to music, anything that fills the silence. And suddenly it hits them. They can't think their way out of this one. Because what's breaking inside them isn't something logic can fix. It's grief. Grief for the love they pushed away. Grief for the peace they never let in. Grief for all the times they could have reached for you, but didn't. Their mind starts replaying moments. But this time, the memories feel heavier. That conversation they cut short. That text they left unanswered. That softness in your eyes. They couldn't look at too long because it made them feel too known. It all comes rushing back. And for the first time, they stop explaining it. They just feel it. That's how you know. They're beginning to change. When the avoidant stops rationalizing their pain and starts sitting in it. That's not weakness. That's growth. Because avoidance isn't the absence of emotion. It's the fear of being consumed by it. They were never numb. They were terrified. Terrified of feeling too much. Terrified of needing too deeply. Terrified that if they ever let the dam break, they wouldn't survive the flood. But now the cracks are showing, and something unexpected happens. They don't drown. They soften. It's messy, uncomfortable, and raw, but it's also human. They start seeing you differently, too. Not as someone who was too much, but as someone who loved them, in the language they didn't yet understand. You spoke in emotion. They replied in distance. You offered presence. They offered logic. You said, I'm here. They said, I need space. But what they really meant was, I'm scared. That's what most of their avoidance has always been. Fear wearing the mask of control. They weren't trying to hurt you. They were trying to protect themselves from feeling powerless again. Because once upon a time, they did love freely. They did depend on someone. And that love was betrayed, dismissed, or abandoned. That wound taught them one rule. Don't ever need anyone that much again. So they built walls. Smart walls. Logical walls. Walls that looked like independence, but were really protection. And every time someone got close, those old alarms would go off. They'd start analyzing, distancing, convincing themselves that you weren't right for them, or that love just wasn't logical. But logic can't stop longing. It can only suppress it. So here they are, feeling everything. They swore they wouldn't. They won't tell anyone about it. They'll still seem composed, still act fine, still appear in control. But inside, they're unraveling. Their heart keeps whispering what their mind refuses to say out loud. I miss them. I wish I had stayed. I wish I didn't push them away. They start realizing how much of their calm was actually avoidance, how much of their strength was actually fear. And that realization hurts. But it also heals, because to name what's broken is the first step to mending it. They'll begin to see patterns, stretching all the way back. The parent who withdrew love when they made a mistake. The caregiver who told them not to cry. The silence that felt safer than rejection. All those moments became the blueprint for how they do love now. It's not personal. It's familiar. That's what makes their journey so heartbreaking and so hopeful, because once they see it, they can't unsee it. They'll notice how they flinch when someone gets too close, how they tense up when they're truly seen, how they use sarcasm to dodge vulnerability. But now, instead of defending it, they'll start questioning it. Why do I do that? What am I afraid of? What if love isn't the threat I thought it was? That's when healing begins to take root. Not when they feel better, but when they start feeling it all. It's not a straight line. They'll still retreat, still overthink, still choose distance sometimes. But slowly, they'll start returning faster because they're learning something vital. It's not love that hurts, it's the resistance to it. They've spent years fighting feelings, thinking that's what kept them safe. But the truth is, it's what's kept them stuck. Love was never the danger. Their unprocessed fear was. So they begin experimenting. With presence, they'll text first, stay through discomfort, say how they feel, even if their voice shakes. Tiny moments, but they matter because each one rewires their nervous system to believe something new. That closeness doesn't kill them, it calms them. That vulnerability doesn't make them weak, it makes them real. They'll still have days where their mind tries to take over again, analyzing, doubting, building cases against emotion. But now, the heart answers back. It says, you don't have to figure it out. You just have to stay. That's what healing looks like for the avoidant. Not dramatic confessions, not grand gestures, but quiet courage, choosing to stay when everything in them wants to run, letting themselves be seen, bit by bit, trusting that maybe, this time, love won't take from them. Because love doesn't take, it gives, it mirrors, it holds space for what they never thought could be accepted. And maybe one day, they'll reach out to you, not to fix the past, but to honor it, to say, I finally understand what you were trying to show me. I see it now. Because even if you're no longer in their life, you'll always be part of the map that led them here, to this moment, to this awakening, to this quiet surrender, where logic finally loosens its grip and love begins to breathe again. And that's the thing. The avoidant doesn't heal by thinking less. They heal by feeling more. They learn that safety isn't in control, but in connection. And once they taste that, once they feel what it's like to stay present and not vanish, they'll never see love the same way again. When the mind finally lets the heart speak, there's a moment in every avoidance journey that no one talks about. It's not when they come back, not when they apologize, not even when they say, I've changed. It's quieter than that. It's the moment they stop fighting the love that still lives inside them. Because no matter how far they ran, it never really left. It was always there, buried under explanations, under walls, under logic that made sense, but didn't heal. And now, there's nowhere left to hide. Their logic, the very thing that once saved them, has turned into a mirror. And what it's reflecting isn't safety, it's emptiness. They've won every argument with themselves. They've justified every exit. They've convinced everyone that they're fine, but they're not. They're just tired, tired of analyzing every emotion until it disappears, tired of pretending they don't care, tired of turning love into something that always needs proof. They miss feeling alive. They miss the chaos of closeness. Even though it scared them, they miss the way your presence disrupted their order, the way your warmth broke through their distance. Because now they see it. You weren't chaos. You were connection. And the stillness they mistook for peace was really loneliness. They thought safety was silence. But silence isn't peace when your heart is screaming inside it. So they start doing the hardest thing they've ever done. They start listening, not to their thoughts, not to their reasons, but to the quiet ache that's been waiting underneath it all. The ache that says, I pushed away the one person who saw me, and I wasn't ready to be seen. That's what love does to the avoidant. It exposes what they've buried. It shows them where they stopped trusting, where they started hiding. You were never their enemy. You were the trigger for the parts of them they hadn't made peace with yet. And for that, they both resented and needed you because you made them feel. And feeling was the one thing they couldn't control. That's why they left. Not because they didn't care, but because they cared more than they could handle. Avoidance has always been a desperate attempt to manage love, to make it predictable, containable, less risky. But love doesn't live in structure. It breathes in uncertainty. It asks for surrender, and surrender was never part of their vocabulary until now, because something inside them is shifting. They're learning that logic and love were never meant to compete. They were meant to coexist. The mind builds safety. The heart builds connection. Both are needed, but only one can make life feel full. They'll start letting both speak. The mind says, I'm scared. The heart replies, I know, but we can handle this now. That's healing, not perfection, not transformation overnight, just awareness that grows roots deeper than fear. They'll stop running, not because they've figured it all out, but because they're finally tired of leaving conversations, leaving intimacy, leaving love. They'll realize that every time they ran, they weren't escaping you. They were escaping themselves. Because love doesn't chase them. It waits for them to come home. And maybe this time, they finally do. They'll start showing up differently. Not to impress, not to prove, just to be present. To sit in the discomfort without needing to explain it away. To look someone in the eyes and not flinch. To feel their chest tighten and not turn that into logic. They'll begin to understand that healing isn't the absence of triggers. It's learning to stay through them. And when they stay, everything changes. Because beneath all the avoidance, there's always been love. Untouched, patient, waiting for permission to breathe. They start remembering moments that once felt unbearable. Your laughter in the kitchen, the way your voice softened when they withdrew, the night you said, I'm not giving up on you. And they didn't know what to do with that kind of loyalty. They remember how it scared them, because they'd never seen love stay when it wasn't easy. Now they realize that was never about you. It was about them. They didn't believe they were worth staying for. And maybe that's the final piece. Because once they begin believing they are, love stops being something to fear. It becomes something to protect. They'll start to crave honesty, vulnerability, presence. They'll crave what they used to avoid, not because they've become someone else, but because they've come home to who they were before fear taught them to run. And if you're still in their life, you'll feel it, not in words, but in energy, in how they don't withdraw so quickly, in how they let you finish your sentence, in how they stay, even when they're uncomfortable. You'll notice the silence feels different. It's not distance anymore. It's reflection. That's growth. And if you're not in their life anymore, you'll still feel it too. In the way they start loving others, in the softness they once denied, in the compassion they now give freely. You were part of the lesson. That love was never the threat. Fear was. And sometimes, the most powerful healing happens in your absence. They'll never forget you, because the person they're becoming was born from the person they couldn't stay with. That's how deep this story goes. The avoidant never meant to be cold. They were just trying to survive. A kind of warmth they didn't know how to receive. But warmth always finds a way back. It's patient. It's steady. It waits for the moment they finally stop thinking and start feeling. And when that day comes, it won't look like fireworks. It'll look like peace. They'll sit across from someone new, or maybe just themselves. And for the first time, they won't feel the urge to explain love. They'll just let it be. No analyzing, no protecting, no running, just being. Because the greatest thing an avoidant can learn is that safety doesn't come from walls. It comes from being met and still choosing to stay open. They finally understand that love was never meant to be solved. It was meant to be shared. And for once, they'll stop asking, "Does this make sense?" They'll just whisper, "This feels right." Because when logic stops outrunning love, when the mind finally steps aside and lets the heart breathe, that's when they come home. Home to presence, home to softness, home to themselves. And maybe that's what love really is. Not a puzzle to figure out, but a truth to remember. That underneath all the avoidance, all the walls, all the thinking, they were always worthy of being held. Always. If this spoke to you, if you've ever loved someone who ran from what they wanted most, or if you've been the one who ran, take a breath. You don't need to solve it. You just need to see it. Because seeing it is where healing begins.